two special guests in the house. We have Representative John Bell.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, John. And we also have Representative Mike Hager from Rutherford County. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Carol. Glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. Biggest reason that we're going to be talking to Mike, other than we just want to learn about stuff that's going on in other parts of the state, is you chair the Energy Committee.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And that's exciting because there's a lot of new stuff going on. There's some controversial things as well, but tell us probably what the biggest thing is right now that is happening.
Well, Carol, I appreciate you being interested. It's not a subject that a lot of folks are interested in because it does get very complicated, it does get very technical. But, what we're dealing with in North Carolina is a pretty big energy economy. And that economy does two things. It employs folks, it puts folks back to work, pays good wages, but it also brings other industries here. Heavy manufacturing, if we get our energy prices right. We have in the western part of the state, we have a lot of data centers that use a lot of energy. It brings them here because our cost of energy is relatively low compared to other folks. So it does impact everybody across North Carolina, from agriculture to the data centers to high tech to really manufacturing and everything. So we're looking at, we have a goal in North Carolina of trying to keep our prices as low as possible at the same time of growing the economy. So some of our big issues, of course, are on the renewable side, net metering, solar industries, a renewable energy portfolio bill, a thing that's called qualifying facilities that the federal government mandates, third-party sales. There's a lot of issues around those. Then there's a lot of issues around natural gas production in North Carolina and how we integrate natural gas into our portfolio of energy.
I wish you knew a little bit about this. You sound like you've had no experience in the energy industry whatsoever.
Well, fortunately, when I came into the legislature, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering, and I worked with Duke Energy for 17 years. And prior to that, while in college, I worked with the Public Service Natural Gas Company. And of course, my dad retired from Public Service Natural Gas, so we have been in the energy business for a while.
And that brings an expertise that generally isn't found on committees like this within the state or federal legislature, for that matter.
Well, I kid with my other legislators that are non-engineers and tell them the only reason I get to chair the Energy Committee is because I know how to spell hydraulic fracturing.
I'm impressed.
Well, don't make me spell it, though.
We'll not do that. So let's talk about fracking, because there's a lot of people who don't understand it, and there are some misnomers about it.
There are. Right now, as 2012 numbers, there are about 2.5 million wells around the world that have been hydraulically fracked and horizontally drilled.
2.5 million?
2.5 million across the globe. And fracking started in 1947 in Texas and was patented in 1949, so we've been doing it for a while. And a lot of folks want to look at the Marcellus Shale, which is in the Pennsylvania area, as an example of where it's done right and where it's done wrong. When Pennsylvania started the process of horizontal drilling, hydraulic fracturing, it was really kind of the wild, wild west. They really didn't know what they were getting into, really didn't know the size of the gas pocket there. But once they got into it, they found the need to develop rules, of course, because there were a lot of issues with groundwater contamination, a lot of issues with the amount of water used, a lot of issues with ground contamination in general. So they had to really start putting some regulations, some rules behind it and get the environmental folks involved. And you fast forward till about the last 5 to 7 years, the University of Buffalo worked on a study for New York when they were thinking about allowing hydraulic fracturing. They had found no notice of violations in the Marcellus Shale for 5 years. So that tells you that Pennsylvania has gotten the rules right, and that's what we're working on now. And we put together what's called the Mine and Energy Commission almost 2 years ago now, and they're developing our rules, and we're giving them 2 to 3 years to develop rules. And those rules will come back to the legislature, and Representative Bell and I will be able to look at those rules and say, are these protective enough? And at the same time, do they allow business to come in here and operate and make a profit? And if we think we've struck that balance, we'll pass those rules. If we don't think we have, we'll send them back and say we don't like this, or not restrictive enough on water quality, not restrictive enough on water sampling and those things. So that's where we are now.
Well, and the state as well as the country have come far in protecting our environment. And you also deal with that.
Yes, ma'am. I'm chair of the Environmental Review Committee, and part of that issue between fracking and environment is groundwater, which is our most precious asset, as you know, is surface water and groundwater both. So we're working hard to protect it. We're working on, putting different chemicals to be able to hydraulic frack that are good for the environment, or at least benign for the environment. There's a company in the Research Triangle Park that's working on a food-grade additive as a fracking fluid, which is fantastic. There's folks working on a waterless fracking, which wouldn't require us to use any water from the groundwater or from the surface water. So, this is a great country. You put the challenge out there, and folks will rise to the challenge.
Absolutely. So let's say we get everything right. You like the rules. We're environmentally correct. What are the benefits to our state to allow this to come in?
At this point, without some testing, what's called 3D seismic testing, we really don't know how much gas we have. But we do know one thing, probably sure of one thing. that we have what's called wet gas. Wet gas is different from dry gas. Dry gas is mostly in the Marcellus Shale. Wet gas has all the chemicals that come with chemical companies wanting to locate back in North Carolina and back in the United States. So that drives more jobs. We have the ethanes, the propanes, and those things within our natural gas, not to mention the methane is what the natural gas is. So we're hoping because we have this, it will bring the chemical industry back across from India and from Europe back into North Carolina, back into the United States. And to give you a good example of the cost we're talking about, normal dry gas, which is what the Marcellus has, sells for about $4 a million cubic feet. Wet gas sells for almost $15 a million cubic feet. So you're talking about a lot of difference, almost 4 or 5 times difference. So we're sitting on what may be a small gold mine, but a gold mine. So there's a lot of opportunities in driving jobs. There's a lot of opportunities in keeping that revenue in North Carolina. There's a lot of opportunity for exports of that product also.
And then, of course, you have your power company, so that's always going to be a necessity. But when you look at a cheaper, more efficient alternative, which is natural gas, you're talking about providing an incentive to the local economy as well, and to residents and businesses.
Well, natural gas is, I won't say it's a perfect fuel, but it's close to perfect fuel as you can get, because you can actually drive cars with natural gas, which gets us off a lot of the foreign oil issues that I'm concerned about, which I consider as a national security issue. You can use it to produce electricity. You can use it at your house to heat your home. As Duke has moved away from a lot of their old coal plants, they're actually putting in natural gas plants, which produce far, far less pollutant than the coal did. In some cases, 90% less.
Well, and we've had that happen right here, Duke Progress. Piedmont Natural Gas ran lines to Duke Progress, and that's how that plant is being run.
And what we want to do, one of the emphases we want to do in the energy and partnering with agriculture also, is we want to start getting more of those gas lines out there. We met with Piedmont Natural Gas yesterday about getting natural gas to farms, whether it's a tobacco farm or whether it's a cotton, whatever they grow, and be able to use that natural gas for some of the drying processes will save them huge amounts of money. In some cases, it'll knock 60% off a farmer's cost of energy.
60%?
60%, yes, ma'am.
And they already do have natural gas going to some farms, and now it's just expanding that.
Well, Senator Jackson and I worked on a bill last year that allows us to take some of those commerce dollars for economic development and actually help put natural gas lines to these farms, which we think is a great issue for economic development.
I want to go back to something that you said a moment ago in terms of our reliance on foreign countries as far as our fuel sources, and you consider that a national security issue.
Yes, ma'am, I do, because we don't get a great amount of our oil from the Middle East. We get a lot from Canada, we get a lot from Mexico, but the uses and how much we use in the United States drives up the price of oil, drives up the price of barrel oil for Russia, for folks like Venezuela, for folks like Saudi Arabia, and these folks, some of them which don't like us a whole lot. So basically what we're doing is we're fueling the need for oil, which fuels their economy, which allows them to fund folks that don't like us, and you know what happens with that. So as we move away from oil and gasoline and diesel, we move more into natural.
John, you're sitting here just as enthralled as I am.
I was learning. One of the good things about being in the General Assembly is you have, on the House side, we have 120 different members from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds. We're very blessed to have Representative Hager heading up a lot of our energy issues because he is an industry expert on that. Then you look over here, and what better person to take on agriculture issues than a farmer like Representative Jimmy Dixon. And then you get a guy like me who just kind of finds their way and we make it happen. It's nice to have these experts in the General Assembly that can help lead, because you want to make good legislation, you want to make good choices for the state, but you also want to make informed choices. And these guys bring a lot to the table.
Well said. And I think the thing that I'm very excited about, besides talking about energy this morning, is, Mike, you come from the western part of the state, and, sometimes the Triangle area can be viewed as a great divide. The eastern part of the state only goes to the mountains to visit the state parks and see the leaves turn or see the snow, and then they come back to the east, and there's not a lot of interaction. So bringing you in to the eastern part of the state today is huge.
Carol, thank you for that. And it is important to me personally that we bring everybody in the economy, all 9.5 million people in North Carolina, with us in the economy. Last year, Senator Walton and I worked on a sweet potato distribution place that needed a natural gas line that I got involved in. Was that in my district? No. Was it even west of Raleigh? No. But it was important to drive those jobs somewhere in North Carolina. So I think John and I both feel the same way, that a job created in, whether it's in Asheville, whether it's in Wilmington, or whether it's in Charlotte, or anywhere in between, is a job for North Carolinians and is a job that's important to us.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And we have a governor from the western part of the state. And guess what, people? North Carolina's still alive.
Now, Carol, we don't consider Charlotte western part of the state.
You don't?
No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, my gosh. Should I just, push that away?
Yeah, they're kind of Piedmont.
No, but the interesting part is the eastern part of the state and the western part of the state both have a lot of the same issues, even though we look completely different. I'll take our beaches any day over their mountains, and Representative Hager would take his mountains rather than the beach. But, besides the geography there, we have a lot of the same issues.
And John's right. I mean, you got a lot of the unemployment issues. You got a lot of the lack of industry issues. You got economic development issues. A lot of the economies, even though you've got beaches on one side and mountains on the other side, a lot of the economies are virtually the same once you get outside the big cities. So John and I have partnered on a lot of issues that drive economic development. We partnered on, and I helped him get the bill through on the windmill bill.
And that was a huge bill for our area. Of course, we all heard about the wind turbine issue. And one of the committees that has to go through was Representative Hager's committee. And he was instrumental in making sure that we got it right. And so I was happy to have his help on that.
And, you just told us something that a lot of people don't think about. But you do have to have these different committees sign off on it, weigh in on it. So that makes sense. And it was a huge coup for the eastern part of the state and Wayne County with Seymour Johnson.
Well, I want to get back to energy because there's so much to learn here. But, when you talk about the military, I believe it's somewhere around 88 counties of our 100 have some type of military impact in there. So just because you don't have a military installation in your area, it doesn't mean that you may not have a military contract or a military provider or folks involved in the military. So it's a huge deal for our state. Representative Hager saw the need for that along with the other members, and that's why we have the bill we do today.
And, Carol, John really helped me understand what BRAC was and how important that was to make sure we did the right thing in North Carolina for the military around this area especially. So he played a huge role in securing that bill, making sure it got through, making sure it had the right language in it for the military and working with the military. So as a freshman, he's already developed that expertise and developed that knowledge already, which is fascinating me because it takes folks usually a couple years to figure that out.
Well, the one thing that I wish everybody would pick up on, and that includes the national media, is it seems like right now North Carolina is showing how government should work together. You guys are coming from opposite ends of the state. There are people up there in our state legislature that come from different sides of the aisle, but it doesn't matter. You're all working for the better of North Carolina.
That's right. And I think, we want to make sure the taxpayers understand that we appreciate, the money that they give us and that we use it very wisely and that we're very careful with it. And it is a precious asset to us. We treat it like it's our own. We don't treat it like it's somebody else and just comes in from somewhere else. And I'll give you a good example. Yesterday, sitting in the Environmental Review Committee, we had UNC Chapel Hill folks come in and talk about what's called their Bingham facility, which is they keep some animals there for testing, for medical testing, those things. Well, they want to expand that, and they were going to go out there and spend, $12 million. Well, $12 million turned into $16 million because of cost overruns, errors in construction, and all those things. And we have to hold those folks accountable for that. We have to make sure that we're spending every dime very preciously, squeeze it as much as we can, and be cheap in some cases. We need to make sure we're doing the right thing. And that's why I want your listeners to understand that we take our job very seriously, and John does and I do too, about spending their money.
Well, we couldn't ask for anything more. That's what we elected you there for. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Let's go back to talking about opposite ends of the state, so to speak. One thing we have in common, whether it is the mountains or the coast, a lot of state parks. And you said something while we were talking off the air that in growing North Carolina, and especially in the energy field or industry, it would allow us to do all the things that we want to do that bring pleasure to our citizens, from building better schools and providing more teachers and state parks, so many things. So expand on that if you don't mind, Mike.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Well, we spend about $20 billion, $21 billion in North Carolina every year of taxpayer money. That's what we have control over. And, in my district, I have the largest state park in North Carolina, which is South Mountain State Park, and I have probably one of the prettiest ones, which is Chimney Rock State Park. Both of them are just very beautiful, mountainous, good views, but we can't have those things. We can't have good infrastructure. We can't have good schools. We can't build good schools that have all the technology involved in them, have parks and recreation, unless we have a vibrant economy. Unless we have folks back to work, unless we have folks paying their taxes, we can't do all this nice stuff. I use the example a lot that if your house is on fire, do you go build a garage? You put your house out of fire first, then you save to build the garage. And that's where we are. We want to be very tight with our money. We want to treat it like you would treat your household budget. If you don't have the money to go do something, don't go do it. Make sure you do the fundamentals first. And our fundamentals, of course, are keeping our infrastructure up, our road systems, our buildings. Right now we have buildings that 10 years ago were falling down, and we just haven't even looked at them in 10 years because we didn't have the money to fix them. We have schools like that. We have a lot of our DOT buildings, our DMV buildings, a lot of those things we're having issues with. we need to have a good Medicaid system, and you guys know where that is. That is
yeah.
such turmoil. We see $300 to $400 million holes and have to put more money into it every year. So John and I both asked the question: is okay, if we're seeing $300 million more every year, why haven't we fixed that problem yet? Why do we keep having these surprises? We got to have a good school system. We've got to educate our children. We've got to do the right thing and have the best education for our children that they can find anywhere. And every parent does not have to put their kid in a public school. It's a parental choice, in my opinion. That's just the opinion that I share. I don't know where John is on that. And the last thing is, we've got to be able to protect our citizens. We've got to have a good highway patrol system. We've got to have a good prison system. We've got to have a good system, a court system. So until we do those things right, it's going to be hard for me to say, let's go spend money somewhere else. So let's get our house in order first, I guess is what I'm saying. That will drive our vibrant economy, and that will put people back to work. And that relates so close to energy. We were talking off air about what this natural gas boom would mean to North Carolina. If you look right now, they're getting ready, the folks in charge of the pipeline coming up from Louisiana, getting ready to reverse the pipeline to send natural gas from the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania for export in Louisiana as soon as we can get the permits in order in New Orleans and other places, as soon as we get all that lined up with the federal government. Well, it's a much shorter trip from the Marcellus Shale to our ports here in North Carolina. So we could build a facility to offload liquefied natural gas to send to Europe, for instance, because it's a closer trip to Europe from our ports. How many jobs did that create to build a port to be able to export liquefied natural gas to a continent that has a 300 to 400% markup in natural gas from what we're seeing here? So you're talking about driving the economy. That's a good example.